Hello BookTube, this is part 11 of my 2022 library tour. Today I'll be finishing off the modern and contemporary fiction section, this bookcase right here behind me, and there'll be two random Victorians because I have no other spot to put them, and I'll talk a bit about that when I get to them at the end. So let's get started. First up on this shelf is The Lesser Bohemians by Eimer McBride. This is a novel I picked up from Book Depository. I think there was another novel by Eimer McBride that I was interested in, and I don't remember if Steve Donahue highly recommended this novel before or after I bought it. But I do know there was a BookTube, a tag going around in mid-late 2020, started by Olive, of a book Olive, where she listed 10 books she recommended or something, and then Steve Donahue sort of weaponized it, as he is wont to do, and The Lesser Bohemians was one of the novels that he had on there. So I've had a few goes at it and haven't quite gotten it. I have had an issue with reading fiction the last 2 years, so that could be a part of it. So maybe now that whatever issue I've had might be going, might be a good time to have yet another go at The Lesser Bohemians. Next is Charming Billy by Alex Mcdermott. I first read this novel in 2017 from my local library. I want to say I probably watched Alex Mcdermott talking to Politics and Prose about her current novel at the time, and that got me interested in looking for her work. And I saw this at my local library, and I read it, and I really enjoyed it. It's about a man, Billy, who's basically dies of alcoholism, and how his cousin sort of processes it, and his cousin's relationship with Billy and stuff. It's really good. I've read it twice. So. Most recently, and I think 2020, I think. I want to kind of get all of Alex Mcdermott's work at some point. It might be a project here for a few book hauls. Anyway, next up is An Arrow's Flight by Mark Merliss. Not this exact novel, but a copy of An Arrow's Flight was the other book I bought for the first time. When I first went to a Book People, I bought Word of Mouth and An Arrow's Flight by Mark Merliss. This is a modernization of Philoctet, I would say. Basically, the story of Paris, the son of Achilles, who has to be brought to Troy to ensure the success of the Trojan horse. That Paris's presence at Troy is necessary for the Greeks to win. And this is sort of a modernized retelling of it. At the beginning of the novel, Paris is a go-go boy. And that's about all I know. I tried it when I first got it, or near enough, and kind of let it pass. I bailed on it. But I've wanted to go have another go at it ever since, so I eventually reacquired this copy. Next up is Acts of Worship by Yokyo Mishima. This is a short story collection that I've had for ages. I want to say it was probably like 2000, 2001, early 2002 when I got it. I picked it up from Barnes & Noble and really enjoyed it. There's some really fantastic stories in here. It's been far too long since I've read them, though. I really need to have a go at those. Next is In Two by North Morgan. This is a North Morgan. Sorry about that weird pronunciation of Morgan. This is a contemporary gay novel about a young man who I think goes to work for his father or something and has a lot of sex. I read it in 2018, or I think it would have been 2018. Steve Donahue hauled it, and the description kind of sounded interesting, so I picked it up. But it's been a while since I've read it, and I don't quite remember a lot about it, so I need to revisit this at some point. Next is The Last Romeo by Justin Myers. I picked this up from Book Depository. It's the story of a young man who his long-term relationship ended, so despairing of ever finding love, he basically goes on a bunch of dates with men he's hooked up with via an online dating site, and he blogs about these experiences. I didn't particularly care for the novel, but maybe I'll have another go at it at some point. And we have These Violent Delights by Mcdermott. This came out late last year. It's basically a modern retelling of the Leopold and Loeb case, in which two gay lovers in 1970s Pittsburgh have a toxic relationship and eventually end up committing murder. I read part of the novel before bailing, and I liked a lot of it, and I probably should, and I will come back to this at some point, and see if my opinions change. Okay, next is another work of gay literature. This is I'd Swim Two Boys by Jamie O'Neill. This is the story of two young men in Ireland in the early 20th century who fall in love. I picked this up from the used book sale, or the used kind of bookstore that's not San Francisco State University's bookstore, but there's a little room in one of the buildings at San Francisco State University where you could buy books. It's like a little book sale room where I bought quite a bit of books. Really enjoyed going there. I'm pretty sure this was one of the books I bought there. Although there is a possibility I could have bought this at the same place I bought the Swimming Pool Library, but I'm pretty sure I picked this up from the used book sale section, or the used bookstore room or something. Next is There There by Tommy Orange. This is a book that came out a few years ago. It's about Native Americans in Oakland and how pretty much a number of primarily young Native American men, but also Native American women, kind of approach their heritage and the upcoming powwow. And I quite enjoyed it. It was really, really good. Next is Gutter Boys by Alvin Worloff. I picked this up in San Francisco at a different night. It's 1970s gay novel. I mean, it didn't come out in the 1970s. I don't think, but it's set in the 70s. It's about the punk scene and everything. I don't remember particularly liking this, but I mean, it's been a while, and I probably should have a revisit of that. Next is Our Man in Iraq by Robert Persich. This is a story of a journalist who gets his brother a job as a correspondent who's supposedly the Baghdad correspondent during, I'm assuming, the most recent Iraq War, and things get a little bit weird. I picked this up on a lark and haven't gotten to it yet. Next up is Blue Angel by Francine Prose. This is a story of a creative writing professor at a New England university who is accused of sexual harassment by one of his female students, the most gifted of the students. And yeah, his life is subsequently ruined. This book I've been obsessed with this book for nearly 20 years. I saw a review of it in my local paper, or the paper of the Waco Tribune and Herald, when they ran book reviews. And I was interested. It intrigued me, and I've wanted to read Blue Angel ever since. But I never got around to either buying it or finding it. It was never in my library. It took me until a few years ago to finally get on to actually ordering it online. And when I did and read it, I was a bit infuriated. I definitely need to revisit this book at some point, but yeah. Usually my instincts, like I'll get like an affinity or an interest in something, and usually it will pan out. But in Blue Angel's case, it didn't quite. Although maybe a reread, now that hopefully whatever my issue with fiction has been is over, I'll have a better reading experience of it. And next is a short story collection. This is Night at the Fiestas by Kirsten Valdezquade. I first read this 6 or so years ago when I decided to, before I was on BookTube, well before I was on BookTube, I was watching and when I first discovered BookTube, I was watching a Simon Savage video where he did a try a story tag. It's one of those tags where you read a chapter, read a short story, and then you basically, depending on the strength of chapter or story, you read the rest of the novel or collection. So Night at the Fiestas was one of those collections I selected, and I think was the one I liked the most, or came in second place, and then I later read the whole series or collection, and then wanted it and added it about a year or two ago, and recently reread it. Next is City of Night by John Ritchie. This is a seminal work of gay literature. It's about a hustler who travels the country from New York to Los Angeles, San Francisco, New Orleans, and has a series of adventures, figuring himself out, and it's really good. It's been too long since I've read it and really need to read it again. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. Next is The Lager Queen of Minnesota by J. Ryan Stradle. This is a novel that came out about maybe a year or two ago. I picked it up from Fabled Books. It's it's not new anymore. It's about 2 or 3 years old, but it's an independent bookstore in Waco that I wanted to support during the pandemic, since it was a new business at that time. And I bought 3 books from them. You just saw They're There. Also bought The Great Believers from them, and Lager Queen of Minnesota. This is a family drama about 2 feuding sisters, one of whom has become incredibly wealthy off of, I'm assuming, the strength of her beer recipe or something, and the other half of the family not being as financially successful because of some dirty dealings that a more successful sister did. I haven't gotten around to reading this book yet, and I really need to. Next, I have Lot by Brian Washington. This is a short story collection. I bought it from Book People. I think this was one of the 3 books I initially bought from Book People in 2020. I had a desire to sort of support local independent bookstores early on in the pandemic, and Lot was one of the 3 books I picked up. And I read it, I think about a year ago, and I bailed about halfway through, and some of the stories were quite good, some not so good, but I definitely want to have another go at some point. I did like Washington's novel Memorial. I thought that was really good, and I do want to at some point add that to my collection, I think. Next is anthology. This is Anti-Story, an anthology of experimental fiction edited by Philip Stivic. I'm not entirely sure what drew me to this. I'm thinking it's got to be one of my writing books. I could swear it's Wonder Book, but I didn't see it mentioned the last time I read it. But it's an anthology of experimental fiction that I had in my Libris cart for ages, and finally decided to pick it up either in late 2020 or early 2021, and read it late last year. And there were quite a few really good stories in here. I really liked The Gold Shoveler by Keith Fort, which seems to be the only thing he ever wrote. Also The Rhinoceros by Eugene Ionesco. So yeah. It's a very interesting anthology, I think. And finally we get to the 2 Victorians. So, last year for Victober, I wanted to participate a bit more. I don't really have much, really don't have any Victorian literature in my collection. And I wanted to sort of correct that and participate a bit more and participate more fully in Victober. Even though every time I do try to participate in a booktube event, it kind of blows up in my face. So, anyway, so I decided to pick up 2 Victorian novels to try to read for Victober. It didn't quite turn out how I had hoped, and I will talk about that when I get to the second book. But first is The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. I've had this book before in a modern library edition, and I think I tried to read it and I bailed, just moved on to something else. But I've always wanted to go back to it. And so I bought this copy. It's an ex-library copy from the Wildwood Secondary Library, so I'm assuming it was originally in the school library. And I need to eventually get back to it. And the other Victorian book on this shelf is The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. I picked this one up on the strength of Steve Donahue's recommendation. He loves Trollope. He does a periodic entire Trollope oeuvre read-along. And so I decided to bite the bullet, pick up a Trollope novel and read it. And so I decided on The Way We Live Now. And I started it during October, and I didn't like it. It bored me, so I went and bailed on it. I might come back to it at some point when I have some time. This is also an ex-library copy from the Frank Toby Jones Library. So, yeah. Now, the reason why I have two Victorians on the modern and contemporary fiction shelves is because I don't really have another spot for them. The second shelf of my headboard bookcase is completely full. I guess I could have put them on the bookend book tower, but I just decided to put them on that shelf. And so, yeah. So that concludes my modern and contemporary fiction shelves. Tomorrow I'll be moving on to the manga. I'd originally thought about saving the manga for last, but the more I think about it, the more I like the idea of going ahead and doing the manga tomorrow, so that way if I do end up getting a lot more manga towards the end of the book tour, the library tour, it's not going to be much of a problem because I've already taken care of them, and whatever manga I add to the collection, obviously you'll be seeing on my book hauls. So, anyway, BookTube, until tomorrow and part 12 of my 2022 library tour. Thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.